A lot of recruiting questions, so we'll go ahead and jump in with Matt Ray as he joins the program. Matt, AP, big time recruiting weekend for Tennessee overall. Before we get into the specifics, Matt, kind of how would you assess how Tennessee did in terms of recruiting? A couple of official visitors and a lot of big time unofficial visitor and some 25s as well.
Yeah, it was a good weekend for Tennessee. I mean, you get Jordan Seaton in, and that's kind of the news that rocked Twitter in midweek, and you get him here and you capitalize on it. It seemed like you really put a good foot forward with him, right, Austin? I mean, I think when you look at what you were able to do with Jordan Seaton, you're probably going to lock him in for an official visit later in the process. He really enjoyed being around Josh Heupel, Glenn Ellerby, spent a lot of time with Boo Carter, and I think this is maybe a little overlooked this weekend, but all of these commits wanted to be here this weekend. It was important for them to get out to a game, and a night at Neyland was important for them. So I think that was maybe an overlooked piece throughout the weekend as they all had a really good time together.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I thought having all those players here to be around a guy like Jordan Seaton, to be around a Cam Michael, that's big. Obviously, Merklinger, it knows Cam Michael really well. Boo Carter's been working Cam Michael for a while. They saw each other at Colorado. Same thing with Jordan Seaton. And then you have Mike Matthews there, Edwin Spillman. I think it's important. And I think it was important to have Bennett Warren there, to have another offensive lineman. And honestly, if I'm Tennessee, I'm thinking, man, that's great that Bennett's been so active in trying to recruit Jordan Seaton to Tennessee. Because you never know how another O lineman is going to take another O lineman. Like, does he see it as competition, or does he see it as, hey, it's my guy on the other side, And, I think that all that plays in. Jordan Seaton looks like an official visit for the Georgia game in November. And, again, Tennessee put their best foot forward. I think that they have rocketed up the charts for Jordan Seaton. I would put them right there with Alabama at the top for the big 5-star offensive lineman from IMG.
All right, so that's one of the big three that Derek is asking about right now, but a couple other OVs, Cam Michael, you had Hill in here as well. How did Tennessee do in the OV category, Matt?
Well, I talked to Cam Michael this morning, and Tennessee's been at or near the top of that, and we've said that for a little while, and it still feels like that's exactly where it's at. He's going to take a trip to Texas A&M next weekend, and to me, that's the one you have to survive. You're looking at a guy that he has a lot of schools after him, pulling him in a lot of different directions, trying to get him to slow this thing down. But Tennessee's been a constant for him. And this visit was important. He got all of the questions answered that he wanted to get answered. He including the academic side. He had a chance to meet John Tickle, ask and get questions answered about the engineering program, which is important to him. Says he's going to make it to Kentucky at the end of the month. We'll see if that happens. I mean, for me, I wouldn't rule it out. He's been very diligent in this process. Georgia's tried to get him to push the timeline at certain points. Other schools have tried to, get him to change the direction in the way that he thinks. But Cam just moves at his own pace. So, I wouldn't rule out that Kentucky visit, but we'll see if it happens. I'm just kind of curious if he sees everything that he needs to before then. But regardless, I think he's got his mind made up that he wants to be committed somewhere by the end of the first week of November. And, coming out of this visit, I like where Tennessee sits, but you have to survive Texas A&M, and they're going in on Cam pretty hard.
What do you think about where they are with Daniel Hill? What was the story on that visit? That one seemed much more, I guess, feels like that one's a long shot, even compared to, Seaton felt better because it was an unofficial match. You had a chance to get him back for an official. This was your one shot at Daniel Hill. How much ground could they realistically make up there?
Yeah, it's been a struggle dating back to January to get Daniel Hill to campus, right? I mean, coming in January, it didn't happen. Coming in March, didn't happen. Finally get him out here in May for 865 Live, and then you just now get him back. I think there's a lot of mutual respect there between Daniel Hill and Jerry Mack, and that's one of the reasons that he slowed the process down a little bit. But still feels like Alabama is that team that's setting the bar right now. It feels like South Carolina's fallen off some, but gets here closer to midday on Saturday, checks out midday today. It's hard to make up a lot of ground when he hasn't been here as much. Alabama's closer to home. He's been there numerous times. I mean, it still continues to feel like a long shot right now.
Yeah, I mean, to me it does too, but we'll see what happens. All kinds of crazy things happen, and there's a lot of comments over in the sidebar about kudos to Boo Carter for being a peer recruiter and all those things. How big was it to just get Boo Carter himself back on campus? He had the Colorado visits, kind of stirred all those things up and got that going. How big was it, not for him to necessarily help recruit, which he obviously is doing, but just to have him back around a bunch of other committed players? How important do you think that was for Tennessee and Boo Carter, specifically for him?
Yeah, I think it's big for Boo Carter. I mean, I think he's a guy that he enjoys where he's at. He enjoys the moment. And he tries to live in that. But, for him, I think to be back inside of Neyland Stadium and experience another atmosphere like that would probably solidify some things again for him. Look back to last October. He was ready to commit to Tennessee after they defeated Alabama. Everybody rushed the field, a great atmosphere, that night. For me, I think this is a refresher for Boo Carter of why at that time he wanted to commit. Now, obviously, it took a little while to get to that point, but he had strong feelings that night, and for me, this kind of refreshes and resets things for him. And you can see he's working really, really hard. Talked to Mike Matthews after the game last night, and one of the things Mike Matthews told me was, I treated guys tonight as I peer recruited them the same way that Boo treated me. Everybody that you kind of talked about Boo. He's that guy in this class. I don't really know how to take the Colorado visit at this point. They can still get him back for an official visit too, and they're going to push there. I mean, we'll see what happens, but the more you can get a guy like Boo Carter to campus, the better.
It's kind of like, if you're that guy in the class, then why go to Colorado? But the answer is, you're young. You're never going to get to do this again. Oh, maybe with the transfer portal. And of course, if you're Colorado, you were saying, hey, come here and you can play wide receiver. You can play defensive back. You can return kicks. I get it. But if you're that guy in the class, it's kind of like, well, why even entertain that? Let's shift gears here away from Boo Carter, who was here this weekend. Ron Wingo, big-time target. Any plans to get back to Tennessee in terms of seeing a game day visit or an official visit?
Yeah, Ron Wingo hasn't ruled out taking his official visit to Tennessee later in the cycle. If he does, it'll most likely be for the Georgia games, what he's told me at this point. But it continues to feel like that one trends away from Tennessee. Missouri and Texas have done a really good job there. Colorado's working really hard to get Ron Wingo on campus, but he canceled an official visit there this weekend. So we'll see what Ron Wingo does. He traveled a ton last fall. He hasn't been quite as active this fall, and he's seen Texas, he's seen Missouri, and it feels like he's really high on both of those programs and trying to narrow his focus and get to a decision. If Tennessee gets him back to campus, anything can happen, I guess. But for me right now, it just feels like that one continues to trend toward one of those programs in the Midwest.
Matt, I know no one's making a decision based off a game result or anything, but you had the first of three big recruiting weekends here. Of course, the South Carolina game, the A&M game, and the Georgia game coming up later in the season. The environment, the jerseys, the atmosphere, how much does that move the needle? I mean, the environment was great in Knoxville on Saturday night, and you had some big-time prospects here to see that, just like last year with the Florida game, just like last year with the Alabama game. How much does that move the needle for these guys?
Man, it helps. I mean, I talked to Jordan Seaton on Wednesday, and he was all about, I'm going to be focused on the offensive line. I've heard about the environment. It'll be cool to see it, but I'm really interested in the offensive line. Don't get me wrong. Jordan Seaton looked very strong at the offensive line, but on Saturday night, he came out talking about the environment. Loudest he had seen, probably the best he had been to. It helps. I mean, that's pretty much all you can say about it.
Sorry, guys.
Where you been, man?
I had a phone call that was much more important than talking to you guys from campus, and so I had to hop off. And since Matt was here to answer all your recruiting questions, I knew I wouldn't really be missed anyway.
I'm just trying to figure out what I've got to do to get you on a podcast with me. I can't get you on Trail Tidbits. You hop off here. I'm like, man, what's going wrong here?
Well, again, when
he's looking for a bigger NIL deal, Matt. All right.
I know.
when you get the right phone call, you just, and especially again, like there was nothing I was going to add that you couldn't say. So it's like, it's easier. And I knew if I missed the phone call, it was going to be harder to get back at 9 o'clock. So,
Matt, you got the
business decision.
You got the bye week coming up. So for the team, continue to practice, refresh, get healthy, all that type of stuff. But for recruiting, a chance to get out on the road and go see some guys. How big are this next week, this weekend coming up for the Tennessee coaching staff in terms of going out and seeing some talent?
Yeah, big. I mean, when you look at it overall, 4, 5, 6 weeks into the season, depending on where you're at. So you've had a chance to evaluate tape, look at guys. Now you can go see guys that you want. They're playing meaningful football. You can get out, see commits, and see recruits that you're trying to work on. It's just a big time. That bye week is refreshing in a lot of ways, but for these coaches, they're probably going to scour the road pretty hard.
Yeah, I mean, I would think this is the weekend you're going to go see those Juco kids. Because they play on a Saturday. This is an opportunity for you to go see them play, which leads me to this question, Matt and Austin. Austin, I'll include you in this one if you want to participate. If you don't have better things to do in the last 6 minutes of this show tonight, the balance between a Juco kid and a transfer, where do you think that is in recruiting right now, and what do you think factors into those decisions to take a junior college player or to play in the portal for that spot and a transfer? What's that balance like right now in recruiting?
Well, I think part of and I don't know the exact answer, and I'm not sure anybody really does, but for me, I think it's a little easier to go the Juco ranks in terms of NIL. Like when you go to the transfer portal, they command so much in NIL that I think that's something you have to waiver. Then it goes back to, what's available in the Juco ranks because they're available right now. You don't know what might or might not be available in the transfer portal. Maybe there's 7 defensive linemen and you need several that come about. Maybe there's 2, and all of a sudden you're battling every team in the country for those 2. Whereas the Juco kids, what's available, as we said here, the 1st of October. So that's kind of my thought process on it.
Well, I mean, I think when you look at it and you look back over these last 2 cycles, there's been one Jared Verse and one Bear Alexander. And Bear Alexander somewhat knew where he was going. Jared Verse, it was everybody, like you said, Austin, you're battling everybody for him. When he blew up, you were battling everybody for him. It's just tougher. I think Tennessee trusts their evaluations at this point with the Juco guys. Obviously, it'll be big to go out and see them. You hope to get them here for an official visit at some point. It seems like those are, starting to get a little bit more set in stone. But I think it's just a fine balance in that. It's what do you trust, and can you get them here? Because I think some of these Juco guys are going to be a battle too. I mean, Brian Taylor's got big time offers. Kamari Copeland's got big time offers. Jamal Wallace has started to hear from more SEC teams since Tennessee offered him. So I think all 3 of those guys are going to have intriguing processes to watch heading toward the finish line.
Well, I mean, you had the comment there about Alex Short about Larry Johnson, and I think that's valid. I mean, I don't know if you can sit there and say, as Larry's 8 months into his Tennessee career, that Larry's going to be a real factor or not on the offensive line. Now,
he was always developmental though, right? Because he came in pretty heavy.
Correct, but then you also got a guy like Byron Young who goes, from Georgia Military, who ends up, he's having a really nice, rookie campaign with the Rams and was really good here. So I think anytime you go prep school, military academies, Jucos, Hubbard, there's always a risk. And there's a risk period, right? But to me, the risk is greater when you go that route, unless you're getting a Cam Newton, Alvin Kamara type that had to go Juco. But that no one does that anymore because you can transfer from Power 5 to Power 5.
Yeah, and listen, I've covered a lot more recruiting pre-transfer portal than I have post-transfer portal, and I will say this in the history: junior college offensive linemen typically aren't hits, okay, because it's a developmental position. Not many of those guys pan out very often to be really good players. Defensive linemen are different. It's a different position. It's an easier transition. There's a lot of positions where guys have come in from the junior college ranks, have been successful. I would say of all those, offensive line is probably the least hit percentage compared to other positions out there. And that's just the way it's always been, portal or non-portal. But again, I think it's interesting because, Austin, you bring up a good point. You know what's available. The question is there going to be something better available that you can get who's proven at the level that you're looking for in college football and not? It's an interesting balancing act, is my point. I think it's kind of fascinating to watch this fall.
Yeah, I think that the sure thing is to go JUCO, right? Because that you'll get a body you like. But the higher ceiling is to wait. In my opinion, the higher ceiling is to wait on the portal kids to see what's available, see what's not, and maybe you end up going to the JUCO ranks after the December signing period if there's anything available then. Like I think there's some, you're right. The best word is fascinating because I don't know if there's a right or wrong, but at the same time, it's something you have to monitor.